Dyslexia is different from everybody anyway, right? So, my wife helps me with my spelling and I help her with her math. It's far too simplistic to believe that those with dyslexia can't read or write. But what I'm quite keen to get across is that...
Good day, everyone. Good day to another wonderful podcast. As always, clueless Eli doesn't know really what this entrepreneur in front of me is going to say to us. And I do not know anything about his backstory, but we're going to find out right now, and I'm excited to actually speak to a fellow entrepreneur. He's the dyslexic entrepreneur, as it shows on the screen here. So, Jamie Waller is his name. Jamie, welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Eli. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me onto your platform to share some of my stories, and also what's quite important to me, the story of dyslexia. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure, my man. I'm looking forward to it. So, we're going to do the same old boring thing on this podcast, and we're going to ask you, how do you help people within your business in a positive way? And we'll go with the flow from there.
Absolutely. So, well, I should probably focus on what I'm doing right now and have been for the past 2 years, which I've just released a book called The Dyslexic Edge, and I've spent 2 years researching and interviewing some of the most successful dyslexic people on earth, ranging from Sir Richard Branson, Paul Orfalea, the US print billionaire, to the black farmer who's based just down the road from you, Eli, in Brixton,
yeah.
Wilfred. And what I've done over the last 2 years, along with Dr. Helen Taylor, is spend a lot of time extracting people's life stories from different diverse backgrounds on what it was like for them dealing with dyslexia, but also trying to really connect the dots on why is it that 35% of all US and UK entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 40% of self-made millionaires. What is their secret? And that's what I've done, hopefully pulled out, displayed in an easy format, and given to the readers of the Dyslexic Edge.
Well done, Jamie. You know, things are difficult enough for us as it is already. Our neurodivergent people, be you dyslexic, ADHD, because we always thought that we're not the norm.
Yeah.
We always thought that we have to do things in a particular way. And the reason why I started this podcast to show that, as far as I'm concerned, we are the norm, and it is normal to be different, and it's a good thing being different. Now, you've gone out of your way to show, okay, so why is this the case? Why are we successful, number one, and why do we do what we do? So, saying that, what was it that made you take on this journey? What was the pivotal moment that you decided to say, right, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I grew up in London's Bethnal Green, East London, and that was, for the audience members that are from the UK, that was before people walked around in Havaiana flip-flops carrying iPads in Bethnal Green. That's when it was a real old rough to grow up. And, I grew up with dyslexia, ADHD, colorblind, and poor. So I had to really work hard at a young age in an environment where dyslexia really wasn't understood. You were simply told you were thick, or you were stupid, or you were disruptive. And I went through my childhood from being a really happy, friendly, larger-than-life character to getting quite depressed, not turning up at school anymore. I took about 16 to 18 months out of the school system in total, just bunking off, truanting. And then obviously, with not going and being dyslexic, I simply couldn't catch up. So I left school without sitting any qualifications, any GCSEs whatsoever. And I did which I thought was my only option, which was to start work for myself. I started my business career as a window cleaner. I then went on to selling cars, and I was really fortunate that I started my first significant business age 19, which I sold for over $70 million by the age of 36, and since then I've gone on and set up and grown businesses in the UK, US, Australia, and New Zealand, and I love what I do, and I love the entrepreneurial spark. But during that journey, I became more and more confident to talk to people about my weaknesses. And it was when I met my now wife, who is also dyslexic, but had a completely different upbringing from me, went to a fee-paying boarding school in Oxfordshire, actually went to school with Richard Branson's daughter, that she made me feel more comfortable in, why are you hiding this thing about yourself? There's nothing wrong with being dyslexic. So I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia until I was age 36. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was in my early 40s. But it made me realize, Eli, that it's terrible that there are 15% of the population have dyslexia, more have other forms of neurodiversity, and to put us in a box to keep us locked away from being our best versions of ourselves simply has to stop. So you add all that up together, and then I was really fortunate that I happened to be spending some time with the most famous dyslexic person on earth, so Richard Branson, and him and I were cycling and we were having a chat, and it was during that talk that we realized that nobody that talks about dyslexia from a publishing point of view is dyslexic. Everybody that talks about it is academics that want to talk about dyslexia, and dyslexic people don't particularly like reading stuff from academics. So I took it upon myself to build a case study led material and publish a book, but not just for those with dyslexia. Also in the book, taking out everybody's stories and giving non-dyslexic people dyslexic thinking tips that they might be able to implement in their own personal lives or their own business success. And the book was released in September this year, so not just a few weeks ago, and it's gone on to sell tens of thousands of copies all over the world. So it's landed really well. It's very easy to read. It features 14 different seriously successful dyslexic people and tells their life stories. But if I may, just before I wrap up this part of the segment, what was really key to me is that you didn't just, I always say, I was born in a poor part of London, but do you know how fortunate I am that I was born white, British, and able to speak the language? Can you imagine what it was for, like we mentioned Wilfred, the black farmer, as one of 7 from Jamaica. His version of dyslexia is very different from mine. So while I do believe that dyslexia has some superpowers to it, I don't come from the camp that simply says we should walk around saying dyslexia is a superpower. It's still an Achilles heel. It's still very difficult for people to deal with today as it was 20 years ago. And I think we have to respect that.
Okay, so let's break that down, because some people won't understand what you just said, where your dyslexia is different from the black farmer. What's the difference? Just break it down in layman terms for people here.
Well, let's first say that dyslexia is different from everybody anyway, right? So, my wife helps me with my spelling and I help her with her math. So, it's far too simplistic to believe that those with dyslexia can't read or write. But what I'm quite keen to get across is that if you then layer on other parts of life circumstances, so for example, one of the ladies we feature in the book, Chef Philly, was one of the winners of MasterChef. So Chef Philly's about 26 now. So for her, she knew she was dyslexic, and she was going home saying to her parents, "Mum, I think I might be dyslexic." And because of the value of education that the Indian community put on people, they were simply saying, "Don't be stupid, get back out there, carry on. You're not dyslexic, you're not trying hard enough." So Chef Philly's way of having to get through her issues with dyslexia are vastly different than mine. Or, as we said, Wilfred, who came as one of 7 as an immigrant, who was dealing with racism, who was dealing with poverty much more severe than mine. So you put that on top of his dyslexia. It's too simple to say to 7-year-old Wilfred, "It's a superpower, get over it."
No, I know what you're saying. And as I say to a lot of people, as much as you may have ADHD or whatever the case may be, our environment When you mix everything together, we are very different, and the way it comes out when we have these certain issues, and I shouldn't call them issues because I don't think they are, they come in different forms, hence us being different, which is the way it should be. That's life, and that's the way it should be. So, all right, that's really interesting what you just said, but let's go right back to, with hindsight, you now got hindsight, because obviously you didn't know you was dyslexic, you didn't know you was ADHD, but now we're going to go back with hindsight. Can you go back to the youngest you, where you could see there was issues with your color blindness? Let's go back to the color blindness, because I take it you never knew you was colorblind, because you had it, and you know what you know, right? It's not like you had color and then you went colorblind at the age of 10. So let's go back to the colorblindness side of it. When did they discover you were colorblind, and what was done about it to help you cope with colorblindness?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. Not many people choose that part to focus on. So you're right. I had no idea I was colorblind. I had no idea I was colorblind until I was 24, and I decided that I wanted to sail. My grandfather had been in the Navy, my father in the merchant Navy, and I decided I wanted to learn how to sail, and I took a sailing course. And then when you take a sailing course, you have red and green markers for all your port entries and exits, and red and green lighting systems. And I guess I knew prior to that in some way that I used to sometimes struggle with green and browns, but I never really pinpointed it was color blindness. But it was when I was undertaking that course that I thought, wow, damn, I've really got an issue here. And I was colorblind, and I've had to learn sort of little tricks. And now, don't get me wrong, the sailing code and flight codes and stuff like that all have good ways to deal with that. You know, certain numbers of flashes, certain seconds apart, and stuff like that. But it does mean that it's much more difficult for me to sail a boat than it is an average person. I couldn't become a pilot where someone else might be able to. So colorblindness is it's a weird one, actually, because with dyslexia, you sort of know where your weaknesses are, and you know their weaknesses because you can clearly see what other people, your peers, are competent at doing that you're not. With colorblind, you simply don't know what normal is. And my children, I've got 2 girls, 7 and 8, they think it's hilarious. They can't stop. You know, every now and again they go, "Daddy, what color's this?" And then they'll just laugh their heads off. But you know, I just simply, I don't know. I don't know what I'm seeing.
Okay, so 24 years old, finding out you was colorblind, that must have been quite amazing, to be honest. I think it was more shocking to other people than it was to you.
Yeah.
Would that be correct to say?
Yeah, I would. And it was frustrating, though. You know, I won't lie. You know, the fact that I was still trying to hide my dyslexia at that time. And, you know, so I'm undertaking a sailing course. I know there's going to be a test at the end of it that requires me to have memorized things during the week. And now I've got this other thing to overlay on it called color blindness. I've also got ADHD, which means actually sitting me down in a test environment is not the best environment for me anyway. And this is why I say it's too simplistic to go around the world saying dyslexia is a superpower. If we do that, it sort of says don't try and fix all the negative things that currently happen in the environment where people should be getting more support and help. So, you know, I was frustrated. And maybe even a little angry, you know, a little bit. Why me? Why another thing? You know, you can't just be dyslexic now. I've got to be colorblind, and now I've got ADHD. You know, what else do you want to throw at me?
I mean, but even when we talk about, because I do talk about superpower, not too much, but I do talk about a superpower. And the reason, from my point of view, the reason being, I didn't accept what I call a superpower until about 1.5 years ago, which is pretty sad, to be honest. And once I did that, I then realized, just like everyone else, You don't have to be neurodivergent. You could be so-called normal. Just like everyone else, you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses, right? So you look at your strengths, and my strength was being dyslexic and all my other neurodivergence, because where I was weak, just like in anything in life, when you're weak on certain things, your brain or your body is stronger on other things.
Yeah.
So why focus on just your weakness, when you have this gift in your strengths, and you use that, whether that in your personal life or in business, you can get other people to help you with your weaknesses if you feel that it's beyond you at this point in time or forever. Whatever that case is, remember, everybody follows their own path. I'm not there to judge anybody to say that you must deal with your weaknesses or you must leave it. The point is you have these strengths, and you don't have to keep everyone happy by being the best at everything. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You can just focus on those strengths, and you could actually live a great life by focusing on those strengths. But at the same time, other people would like to work on their weaknesses, which is great, and it works for them. Like, I like working on my weaknesses. So again, it's about being different. There's no right and there's no wrong. And that's the way I see things. All right, okay, let's quickly.
We must also accept, Eli, that, I'm 45 and have access to resource. So, I can use my dyslexia as a superpower now. My 7-year-old daughter, she doesn't have the ability to go into school and outsource the bits that she finds too difficult. She's repeatedly told to sit up, sit still, try harder, get a grip of yourself. So and that's why I do believe absolutely dyslexia and my ADHD has led to a lot of my success, most of my success, maybe even all of my success. But we have to accept again that for some people it's a lot more difficult, and that could be for whatever reason. It could be age, it could be race, it could be sex, it could be just that they're in an unsupportive partnership, and that's the bit that I think is sometimes missed in the modern days, in the modern way that we talk about neurodiversity. I think we're too quick to only talk about the positives and not recognize that there's still a lot of people having a real hard time going through
No. But there's a purpose in that hardness.
Yes.
The reason why we are successful is because we've had to go through the hardness. As you know, right? You've already dealt with some of the top 1%ers in the world. The reason why they're top 1% is because they had to suffer. They had to really take the grind. All right. And because they didn't have the resources, because you didn't have the resources, because you didn't have the support, because no one knew you had A, B, and C, no one knew you was colorblind, you had to try and blag it. You had to find a way. You didn't have a qualification. How am I going to do this? How am I going to survive? And through that hardness, that grind is what has helped you to be successful. And I'm not saying that you can have a silver spoon in your mouth and you can't be, you can, but not in the same way as someone that's actually done the hard work and done the sweat and toil. And you've had this conversation with so many successful people. I mean, how do you see? You've had this conversation. What's your perception on that?
Yeah, I think so. What part of the research we did for this book was this whole thing around explorers versus exploiters. So Dr. Helen Taylor from Cambridge University has done some great work on actually dyslexia is just this sort of relatively new title that we give to the explorers of society, and that pre 500 years ago, roughly 15% of the population were born explorers, 85% exploiters. Explorers were out trying to find new territories, new food. They would come back and they would be celebrated, and then they would hand over this information for the majority to exploit. It was really the church that sort of brought around this whole process of learning because they were petrified of the stories of the Bible being, the stories of Jesus being forgotten. So they wanted to write them down, and then they wanted people to be able to read them and remember them. And the fact is that the explorers in society just weren't very good at that format of learning, and nobody really noticed it at the time because the explorers weren't expected to come and recite the story of Jesus. They were out exploring. But as we've progressed through life, the circumstances have changed. So if you map all of the positive traits of an explorer, they match perfectly to those of a dyslexic thinker. The only one thing that doesn't fit amongst that sort of overlay is this sense of this real fire in your belly and this hatred towards injustice, and that definitely grows with you through childhood, through not being supported, through being told you're thick, through having to try harder than most people, etc., etc. But if you think about what the traits are of an explorer, there are typical traits of an entrepreneur. That resilience, that trying to find something new, that picking yourself up, trying again, that thinking of the bigger picture. Maybe the horizon doesn't end there, maybe it's not a flat earth. Those sort of traits are very typical to entrepreneurship. And so I love the narrative that actually you and I are both explorers, and there's a bunch of exploiters around us. And yes, we are given this title of being dyslexic, but that's a relatively new title. And it's just really a convenient way for government to put a badge upon something that they got wrong. The learning system was never designed to fulfill everybody's needs, but rather than fix it, give it a badge, give some funding towards it. I mean, we're talking 24 hours after our recent budget announcement, where there's been a little bit more funding given towards neurodiversity and special needs in the schooling system. It's just a convenient way to not do much about it, really.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. All right, let's just go back to your childhood, because I'm quite interested in it, because we skipped across it pretty quickly, because it was a situation that you did a lot of parenting, and I get that, because I did some of that myself, because I found it difficult to study, and I had the equivalent of a swimming page. I'd look at the page and the letters are all over the place, etc. So I totally understand it, and it's not because I was stupid, not by any means, but you had the problem studying, you had the problem focusing, and the rest of it. How far back did you have issues? I'm sure you had issues before you went to school. Was there issues interacting with other people, issues when you played with certain toys, or communication? What other issues did you have that with hindsight you have now?
So actually, for me, it was definitely around that 7 or 8 mark. So up until then, I was completely unaware. As in most primary schools, you're being rewarded for turning up on time, looking smart, helping the teacher, sitting well down at lunch. So you go from getting a certificate a week or 2 certificates a week to then they start measuring you on your attainment and levels. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't getting any certificates, and then I started to feel, well, what's wrong with me? Does this teacher not like me? How did I go from being loved to being unloved? And that made me start to withdraw a little bit and question what was wrong with me. And then you naturally see that people have nicer handwriting, get less red marks over their paper, and that made me withdraw even more. And then at age 11, when you go from your primary school to your secondary school, my friends that I loved and spent so much time with all went off to the better secondary school in Bethlehem. And I went to the worst one, and I went to a school where people in the main either had learning difficulties or didn't want to be there. And that meant that my chances of succeeding from my time was marked there and then. The opportunity for me to have got through that any better than the way I did was very, very small. So I went through a real wave of emotions as a child. I went from 0 to 7 being really popular and enjoying everything about school. From 7 and 11 becoming a bit more better at communicating, making people laugh because I was making up for my weaknesses. So I became a lot more outgoing, a lot more, you know, Jack the lad, etc., etc. And then I went from 11 to 13, almost a bit of a recluse. I got severely bullied for about 2 years. And then I went from being bullied to becoming the bully because I thought there's only one way out of this, and that's to fight back. And then I spent an uncomfortable year pretending to be someone I wasn't, which was bullying, fighting, pushing against every piece of authority that came anywhere near me. And then eventually I got through out of 2 different secondary schools. I was very fortunate to be given a place in the secondary school that I always wanted to go to for the last 15 months of school. And when I got there, I was too far behind to progress educationally, but I felt like I had gone back to my home where I deserved to be. And I had a lovely time. I enjoyed my last 15 months. I became that outgoing storyteller, bring people together person, got on with teachers, got on with students, and enjoyed it. You know, I left school without any qualifications, but I enjoyed my last 15 months there. I had a great time. I just had a really miserable few years in the middle of it all.
So you went through quite a few stages, actually, a form of happy, sad, reclusion, one extreme to another, actually. Being bullied, I mean, that must have been a shock and a half, you know, when you went through that stage. And then obviously after approximately 2 years, something snapped in you and you thought enough was enough. And then the bullying turned into you had to defend yourself. And that form of defense meant you bullied other people. And then once you were coming to the end of the schooling, it was a situation where you was on a high, you enjoyed yourself. And that is the kicker, that actually you left school, you had the resilience in you because you had to fight your way to the top, and you left on a high, which put you in a position I can do, no matter whether I've left with a qualification or not. Is that how you
felt? Absolutely. You know, I had no question in my mind, maybe stupidly, but I had no question in my mind, age 15 and 16, those last 2 years at secondary school, that I was going to leave poverty, be wealthy, and be successful. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't have any idols that I was looking up to. I didn't want to be a billionaire, a trillionaire. I wanted to be out of East London. I wanted to own a home, and I wanted to work for myself. And I had no question in my any doubts whatsoever that I was going to be able to do that.
And do you think that was the pivotal moment that gave you the strength, the gall to feel I'm better than this, I can do? What was that thing? I know you went through a stage, those stages helped you to get there, but what was it that, did you see something that you didn't like within the family where they weren't successful and you thought, no, I've gone through these stages, I can do? What was it that, there's always a pivotal moment. You go through the stages, you can either go one way or the other. What made you go in that direction?
So I know exactly when it was. So I was age 14. I was not going to school. I was bullying others. I was pushing hatred against every piece of authority that came anywhere near me. And my mother got breast cancer. And my mother went and spent a period in hospital, which I can't remember how long it was, but 6 weeks or more. And I was left at home with Dad. I had a terrible relationship with my father, who was a bully and an alcoholic, and I hated being there, and I despised having to look after him because he couldn't cook or clean up after himself. But I was going to visit my mum in hospital every day, who was asking me, please look after him. You know, he's of that generation and he doesn't know any better. And I remember just thinking, this is outrageous. No, I looked at my father and I thought, you weak individual, you've spent all this time being strong, macho, beating up my mum, having fights in the street outside my house, being arrested in front of me, drinking yourself silly, pretending you're a real man, and now you can't look after my mum who might be dying in hospital, and you can't even give her the freedom to suffer in quietness without telling her that you need her to come home to cook for you, and you don't understand what bills are coming through the door or how to pay them. And I realized, it was that moment that I realized, no way am I going to be a replica of that. I'm going to be somebody that people can stand on my shoulders at all time through life. So I had to mature very quickly in a short space of 6 to 8 weeks. I became a man of the house, and I became the supporting person for my mother, because I wanted my mum to have the confidence that I wouldn't let my dad, if she got through cancer and she came home, I wouldn't let my dad continue to treat her the way he did. And he never. She came home and she successfully went on to live for another 16, 17 years. And my father never, ever laid a hand on her again, because I made a big decision that during that period of time, that I was going to be the man of the house, and I was going to be a rock, and I was going to be independent. I was never going to be reliant upon them or anybody else. And I was going to be the one that people relied on as an adult and that they could stand by.
Jamie, I respect you in the utmost, and I will be honest, I feel quite tearful, and the reason being is you've been kind enough to open yourself out to everybody, and I see where the strength has come from. You had to suffer in more ways than one before it happened with that momentum with the father situation and your mother. And you struggled with the schooling, with your dyslexia, with your colorblindness, which you didn't understand, and everything else. And then you had all that layered on top. And still, at such a young age, you had the strength to say, I will not be that way. And that was very painful for you. As much as you found that strength, that pain was huge, and I feel it at the time. That was huge. But as I said before we went on to this part of the discussion, you could have gone two ways. What was that pivotal moment? You chose through that pain, and it was extreme. I feel it. It was extreme. And still you had the strength to come out stronger, and then go before your dad and go before yourself, which is even harder, and say, no way. At the age of 14, that's absolutely crazy. I can't.
Yeah, it is. And I should say, you know, and it was in many ways, it wasn't that I just went home and confronted the negatives. I also confronted my own negatives.
Yourself.
I also sat on the tube on my way home from Charing Cross Hospital some nights going, you can no longer not go to school. You can no longer put your mother through this. If she comes home from that hospital, you need to be a better son. It's pointless saying you're going to stop your dad from being a bad dad and then be a bad son. So that's what transitioned me back into the education system and enjoying it and liking it too, because I had this newfound responsibility that was bigger than me.
I get that. And as I said, you had to face yourself. As I said, that's even harder to do. And you've done that at a pivotal point in your stage of life where you could have gone the opposite way. You had all the negative peers around you. It could have taken you in a completely different direction. But you fought against your peers. You fought against your father and the negativity of the cancer, which you could have blamed the cancer for everything and not taken responsibility. You as a child took on the responsibility that I am not going to blame anyone else. I'm going to I am going to this, I'm going to do that. And that's very difficult to do at any age, let alone as a child. And I find that amazing. Your strength and resilience is amazing. And this is what
I should say, you know, I was very, very lucky that I had a mum that adored me. I had a mum that through everything, she was just my best friend, right? So she would have given me everything. She stayed around and put up with that abuse because she knew that she couldn't financially get by without him. So she did so much for me. So I was very fortunate that I had this, you know, my mother was never strong publicly, but she demonstrated so much love to me that it meant that I never wanted to let her down. And that is a real strong driving force. When you love somebody so much and you don't want to let them down, it's a really, really powerful thing.
And it went both ways. You do know that, Jamie?
Yeah. No, I'm sure. Unfortunately, my mum did pass when she was 61, so about 14 years ago. So it is a shame, because actually before I sold my first significant business, so she could see that I was successful and I was employing hundreds of people and stuff, but she never really got to see me she knew my girlfriend, but she didn't see us get married. She didn't see me have children and all of those other good things that she would have loved to have seen. But you know, it runs through all of life, right? It makes me a better father because of the person she was and the things I went through, and it makes me a better husband too. So
and remember, this is what we was talking about, great leaders. The reason why you are so successful, you had to go through great pain. And I say this to you every week, listeners. You know, every time an entrepreneur comes here, we talk about and we go back in history on why and where they come from, but they always come from great pain. It's not nice, but that's how great leaders are born. And I knew with Jamie's success and the amount of people he mixes with, while still forging forward, he had to come through great pain. Hence, sorry, Jamie, that I had to go there with you. I know it was painful you talking about it, but you was comfortable enough to do so, and thank you for doing that.
No, absolutely, and you're right. Not many people have asked that question to get that response, but yeah, I've got goosebumps talking about it. But actually, in a way, it's quite nice to talk about it. And
I think it's important, because there's many people out there that have similar pain but completely different experiences. And by us talking about, you can do it also, as much as you're in that hole and you're in that pain and you think it's not possible. Every week I have this discussion with someone to show that, well, unfortunately, you have to be in that hole and you've got to go through that pain to be successful. And it does spur other people. And I get feedback from a lot of people when they listen to those podcasts, and you know, they do appreciate it, because they go, oh, I see, I understand.
Yeah.
And it is difficult. And Jamie, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so let's go forward from there, because I think that's enough pain work that we've dealt with. So let's go forward. So you've left school and you've decided, right, what am I going to do? Because there's no way I'm going to be broke. There's my mother I need to look after, because I'm not happy with my father and I want her to be independent. I'm sure that's what you were thinking.
Yeah.
Were you? Yes. Yeah. And you wanted to be your own person. So what did you decide to do to make it happen? What was the beginning steps when you left school to make that happen?
So what happened is, I was still at school, and I went to go and sit my first GCSE, which was a history GCSE, and it was sat in a porter cabin in a car park in Bethnal Green. I went into the porter cabin, and as I got in there, I wrote my name on the wooden desk, which was a thing that all kids did back then. You sort of tagged your desk with your name and the date that you were sitting your exams. And the teacher, who didn't particularly like me, came along and asked me to pack up my stuff and come outside for a second. This was before the exam started. I didn't pack up my stuff. I took a few things with me, walked outside, and the teacher said I'm being disqualified for cheating. And I said, hang on a second, I wrote my name. I can show you where I wrote my name. He said he doesn't care. I'm being disqualified from the exam for cheating. So I went and packed my stuff and I walked home and I cried all the way home. Had to cut through a couple of housing estates. I lived sort of 20 minutes from the school. Walked into my house, got myself together, walked into my house to have this conversation with my mum. And then when my mum saw me, I broke down in tears. And I said to her, I can't go back, Mum. I can't do it. I just cannot do it. That one moment reminded me of all the bad part of my education came flooding back, which was a shame because I'd had a good 15 months. Anyway, a long story short, my mother says, Jamie, if you get yourself a job before you're due to sit your next exam, which was, I don't know, a week away or something, then you don't need to sit them. And that afternoon, I went and walked the streets, and I went from building site to building site. And I didn't, don't want it to sound dramatic. I wasn't like in the pouring down the rain. I walked to like 2 different building sites, and I got a job carrying bricks. And I started the next day. I was always quite physical as a young boy. I was always liked the gym and boxing and stuff. And I thought, what a great job. I get to work outside in the sunshine carrying bricks. And this was sort of August, September, or whatever time the GCSE times are. And I got very used to making £60 a day in cash at age 16. And I was meeting up with my friends on a Saturday night, because I had to work 6 days a week. I was meeting up with my friends in the pub on a Saturday night, and I had like £400 worth of cash, £50 notes bulging out my pocket. I always asked to be paid in £50 notes because I like the way they feel. And my friends were having to see if they could get £6-7 off their parents to buy a couple of drinks. And I loved the way it made me feel. I loved the power it gave me. I loved what money could do. And very quickly I went from doing that to doing a different type of labouring, but 12-hour night shifts, and I was making 80 quid a day, which was, loads of money. And then I realised that I was different. I was different from most other labourers on building sites. When I was on a building site, I was looking at the copper wire that we were taking out. How much is that worth? Where's it going?
I know that one. I know that one.
So I wasn't thinking about, when someone said to me, go and move all that copper wire and put it on the back of that lorry, I wasn't thinking, this is a crappy job. I was thinking, I'm going to talk to the lorry driver. So what do you do with this copper wire? We take it for scrap. What scrap? How much is it worth? Well, if it's cleaned, it's worth 50 quid a metre. If it's uncleaned, it's worth £10 a metre. And I'd be going, wow, this is amazing. I'd be learning so much. And then I realized just very quickly that there is money everywhere. And everybody's finding their own little way to get a piece of it. And I just thought, I've got to find my little way. And that little way was window cleaning. I started window cleaning because I just needed something that was easy access, self-employment, and something that I could go on from. I always wanted to be an employer of people. So for 250 quid, I bought some buckets and some ladders. I already had a car and I put a roof rack on it, and I started cleaning people's windows. And within about a year, I had a couple of people working for me. And then I sold that business in the classified ads section of a newspaper and set up a car sales business, buying and selling secondhand cars. And I've never not been self-employed or a business owner since age 17.
So you've got the instinct to see an opportunity.
Oh yeah, but always. I mean, the thing is, right, I mean, ideas are cheap, execution is expensive, right? I mean, if I could sell my ideas, I would be on the neighboring islands of Richard Branson, probably. I mean, ideas are I'm flooded with ideas. But yes, no, I do see opportunities. There's an opportunity in everything, whether it be from scrap metal to VAT on education, private education fees that was announced yesterday. Well, there's going to be all of this additional capacity in these private schools. Could you set up, tutoring businesses? There's always, whenever I see negative news, I see, well, what opportunities is this going to create?
Wow. So let's talk about that. So you're a person that sees a lot of opportunity. You saying that you've always seen opportunities as a child, or did you see opportunities at a particular point naturally, automatically? When did that happen?
I think I always saw opportunities as a child. I mean, when I was age 11 or 12, I had a little bike repair thing going on outside my parents' house. You know, people couldn't even fix their own punctures. And I was like, well, I'll fix your puncture for £1.
Yeah.
And then, you know, started then replacing people's bike parts. Then I was selling the bike parts once I cleaned them up and put them back together. And so I think I always saw, even when I was a smoker age 15 or something, you know, I knew that if I went and bought 20 cigarettes on a Monday morning and sold each of them for 25 pence a cigarette at school, that I could have 7 cigarettes for myself, having sold 13. And so, yeah, it wasn't that I thought, oh, aren't I a great businessman or entrepreneur then? Just it made so much common sense to me that the sweet shops in Bethnal Green used to sell single cigarettes to underage children for 25 pence. I'm like, why are they having to go to the sweet shop? I can bring the cigarettes to them in school for 25 pence, and I can be the supplier of this service. So I've always seen those opportunities.
Okay, and when it comes to, let's delve a bit more into your mindset. So when it comes to negative things that have happened into your life, we're not going to go back to your childhood. We've already done that. You've been kind enough to share that. But when it comes to, let's stick in your 20s, early 30s, if something negative happens that most people would run away and give up with, how would you flip the narrative? What would be the process in your head? Why would you flip it when other people, and you know there's a lot of people around you that was, oh, that's just not, there's no way we can do that. What is in your head that thinks, that's not a problem? And then you sit there ticking away in your head. What helps you flip that narrative compared to other people?
So I've got two stories to share with you here. One is when I was 26, so I'd 24, sorry. I'd set up my first significant business, and I had a competitor that was constantly making threats on my life and telling me to close down my business or else. And I had ignored these. I knew that the chap that was making the threats was quite dangerous, etc., etc. And one evening I got home from work at about 8 p.m. Each side of my car doors were ripped open, and 2 guys jumped on me, pounced on me, and we got into a big fight. And then they ran off and jumped in a van and went off down the road. And it was pouring down with rain. I was lying on the floor, and I got up from the floor, went back to the car to get my stuff, pretty shaken, and I had been stabbed. So I've got a stab mark on this shoulder here. And I was stabbed. I was told I was going to be stabbed a few weeks before, and I was nervous, but my guard was down on that evening, and I got stabbed. And I went home and I taped it up because I was very frightened of this person, what they were capable of. I didn't want to call the police, and I taped it up with big black gaffer tape. And I opened a bottle of whiskey and I sat on my kitchen floor. I lived on my own at the time, and I had 3 or 4 glasses of whiskey, went to bed, woke up at about 4 a.m., went and sat down at a laptop and decided to start designing an advertising campaign to directly go after this person's clients. All the other time that he had made threats to me, I always said, I won't go after your clients. I'm creating a new market, a new area of the market. Just leave me alone. And my reaction that night was, I'm going to get you back. But I can't get you back in the same way you got me back. I'm not going to lower myself to that. I'm going to get you back how it really hurts. And I spent the next 11 years destroying that person's business by taking every contract I could from them. And ultimately, it was my big driving force to making tens and tens of millions of pounds. And what is it? I think it's my dyslexia. I think it's that I cannot deal with a sense of injustice. I don't like it when people do bad things towards people, whether it be myself or others. I have this natural desire to jump right in and sort it out or help. I do quite a lot around with this in charity. So take that story, age 22, which is pretty dramatic. I have to live with that scar every day. My youngest daughter quite often sort of strokes my back and says, bad man, daddy, because, you know, I've shared with them. But fast forward to yesterday's budget. So, you know, we have yesterday's budget, and this morning my wife, I walk my eldest daughter to school. I'm having a coffee with my wife, and she says, so, you know, tell me about it. What does it mean for us? And I said, well, you know, it's not great in many ways. I think it's probably around about a 3 million quid impact on us in the next 12 months. But, you know, we always knew post-COVID that the country needed more money, and as long as that money is being put to good use, and if it really is helping to resolve the NHS system and improve schooling, then we should be proud that we're privileged enough to lose 3 million quid on a night of a budget. And my wife, who very rarely actually would say something like this, but about 20 minutes later, she said, "Can I just say, it's remarkable how I'm so proud of you," she said. She hardly ever says that, actually, but she stops and says, "I'm so proud of you to have that attitude towards what other people might go moping around with today." You know,
it's amazing, Jamie.
But I guess that again, it goes back to that injustice part of me. If you know, if I have to suffer for other people that are less fortunate to gain, then I'm all up for that.
And I appreciate where you're coming from, because I'm built the same way, and I find that amazing that you had that thought, because you put things in perspective. As much as you've got what most people would think a reasonable amount of money, it's still in relationship to your lifestyle. So it doesn't matter whether you make £50,000 a year or 50 billion, it's all relatable, right? So it would be just as powerful as if someone that makes £50,000 a year saying the same thing, because most people, even if they made 30, 40, £50,000 a year, wouldn't say what you were saying. I'm losing loads of money. You know, their equivalent of your 3 million probably is their 15,000, right? I'm losing £15,000. That's absolutely ridiculous. But you still didn't do that. You actually saw it from the point of view, you're giving back to society. You're realistic that something has to be paid back. And you are lucky you're in the position that you can take a hit, still have a reasonable life, still pay the bills, still feed your kids, but also help the country or help your neighbors or etc. And that mindset, which is what I wanted to speak about, not only did you speak about that mindset, but the other mindsets you have, is what has made you successful by going through those pain points all through your life. The cancer, the father, your children, because there's things about your children that's happened, and that's just made you an amazing personality. And that comes down to you. They're not coincidences. They're paths you have decided to take, whether you go left at this point or right. And there's many times that you have to walk left and then right, but you've taken the right steps. And Jamie, you're an inspiration, not only to me, but to others that are listening on here. And I thank you for giving up your precious time to be vulnerable, first of all, so people can relate to you, because it doesn't matter how much money you've got. As far as I'm concerned, how I go through life is we are all the same. We just wear different hats. It's as simple as that.
I agree.
So when you take that hat off at the end of the day, you are a wonderful human being, with or without the hat. And I really thank you for coming on here and inspiring us all.
Well, thank you. And like I meant it right at the beginning of the podcast when I said, thanks for giving me a platform to share what is important to me to help those that may have dyslexia, those that suspect that somebody has dyslexia. For me, this is a real personal mission to help others to ensure that they're not in a closet for a long period of their time like I was, and they're given the ability to come out and be the best versions of themselves. So I thank you for that. And just one final thing for me, if any of your listeners or viewers, and I end every podcast with the same message, know somebody or themselves would believe that a copy of the book would be useful to them and they genuinely can't afford it, just find me on my website, which is simply my name, or LinkedIn, and I will get them a copy for free. This has never been about selling books. This is about helping people.
Do you see this, listeners? When I'm blessed to come across people that all they want to do is just help and spread the word, except they're not preachers, they're helpers. I'm not going to stop there. I want to go a bit further. I want to know a bit more about your book, because your book is very important. And the reason why your book is very important, because the book is you. And with the mindset that you bring to the table, you bring a huge amount to that book. And listeners, this is really important. When you find someone with a great mind or a way about them, a book is very powerful. It's like taking their whole life cycle, and you're able to open up that book for a day, a week, and skim through that life cycle. We are blessed to be in that position. And Jamie, I would like you to just tell us more about that book. I know you said that you've spoken to many people, but tell us a bit more about that book, and how powerful that is.
Thank you. So it's called The Dyslexic Edge, available, as you would imagine, in all formats in all countries around the world. And it features 14 successful dyslexic minds, some of them billionaires, the owner of Carphone Warehouse, Sir Charles Dunstan and Paul Orfila, some of them really early on in their entrepreneurial journeys, and from all different walks of backgrounds. And what we do is, in a chapter on each of them, tell their entire life story. It features Duncan Bannatyne, Theo Paphitis, Kelly Hoppen. I went and spent time with all of these people, in many cases at their homes, for 6-7 hours, and really got a feel for them and their struggles with dyslexia, that where they feel dyslexia has been a benefit to them. And I tell their story in a very raw and honest way. They had no editorial rights. I wanted it to be me and them having a great conversation like we have today, and then me saying that to the readers. And then at the end of every chapter, I pull out the important parts from their life story on what were typical dyslexic thinking traits that led to their success, so that the reader, if they are dyslexic, can recognize their own traits that match those. But importantly, also for those that are not dyslexic, to be able to pick it up and go, how might I think like a dyslexic person and be as successful as them? And like I said, the book is, got great reviews, selling tens of thousands of copies around the world. But it's because of the beautiful, raw honesty, like we have had here today, of each of the people that contribute towards it. I was very, very gifted to be able to spend that time with them, to be able to go and sit with these people in their kitchens and just, in many cases, watch them cry in front of me while they tell me their stories. It was a really, I feel very privileged to have been given that ability to do that and tell these stories.
And in turn, we're privileged that we're in a position that we could effectively sit in those same kitchens by reading your book. Again, you took the time It took you how many years to do that? And we can read the book, and what you did in years, we can now read it within a week. And we are very privileged for you to come on here and give us the opportunity to do the same thing you did, which is to sit in the kitchen with them to have that conversation. And we really appreciate that. And me, for one, I am definitely getting that book.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. There's no way I'm going to miss it. You know, my whole point is to help as many people as possible. This is why I do the podcast, doing the similar thing you're doing. And there is no way I'm going to miss up the opportunity to not be able to sit in that kitchen with you, speaking to all those beautiful people within your book. And listeners, if this resonates with you, I would invest. Listen to what I've said. Invest in the book, because this is investing in yourself. This will be a very important book for you to read, and it's worth the investment. Why? Because the person that's been on the podcast with us today is the one that experienced and wrote the book. And as you can see, he had to go through the pain just like you did. He had to go through the suffering, but he came out the other side, and he's successful with that mindset. And he's rubbed shoulders with similar people, and you can get a snippet instantly just like that. That is a rare opportunity just for the sake of buying a book. Jamie, is there anything you want to sum up and say that I've missed?
No, just you know, for anybody that's neurodivergent and suffering, good luck. Talk to somebody. It always helps. The amount of people I hear from these days that are still hiding it from their loved ones, and it really does get a lot better when you share it. And if you're fortunate enough one day where someone does share with you that they're dyslexic or ADHD or anything else, try to listen. Try to let it be their safe space. If they've found the braveness to start to talk about it, do try and take the opportunity to spend a few months listening. It's not that useful to go, I've got ADHD too. Just let them have a little moment to themselves, and let's all be there for each other.
Yeah, well said. And as I said before, listeners, you know, you've got to accept yourself. I spent too many years, and the camel's back broke with me 2 years ago, and I said enough was enough. And you already know a bit of my journey, listeners. And I said, I don't want anyone to suffer like I did for way too long. And Jamie's in the same situation. And we do what we do because we want to shorten that pain as much as possible. You're going to have to go through it. There's no way of alleviating the pain completely. But we want you to get to the realization that you can do. It is possible. You are something. It is good being different. It is right being different. And this is what we're trying to do. Jamie, thank you, my man. I really do appreciate it. How do people contact you? I'm going to have the link to your book. It's going to be down below so they can
Thank you.
book instantly. Is there any way that they can contact you or your team if they need it? Yeah,
absolutely. So my website is my name, jamiewaller.co.uk or .com. The communication will find its way to me, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't use any other forms of social media, but those two will get to me, and please do.
And as always, I'll have that down below also. So you'll have the link to the website, his LinkedIn, and to the book. Please, 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 if you do not do anything else, at least get the book. And with that said, Jamie, thank you for your precious time. We really appreciate you. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And listeners, we will see you soon, and sayonara.
Thank you, Eli. That was great. Appreciate that.